All right, everyone. Now that I think it was the Wall Street Journal, BuzzFeed, and some of these other groups have been sued by the Covington kids. Now they've got a new target because apparently CNN, I guess, didn't issue its retraction properly or quickly enough. So now they're being sued for $250 million. Now, first, let me point out, like before, they're not going to get $250 million out of CNN. Not that they can't pay it, because you got to remember they're a multinational company. CNN is just the American component of a far larger media organization that has no national loyalty or borders in mind, and it's worth many, many billions of dollars. Huge corporation. CNN's just a slowly dying, thankfully, fake news component thereof. The goal of asking for such an inordinate amount is to get a settlement. It's clear strategy. You make a big ask, they'll be lucky to get 10, maybe 20 million. Basically what'll happen is CNN will say, well, we're going to get dragged through courts. We're going to get dragged through the mud. There is a chance that we lose, and I'm sure that their lawyers will tell them, look, there's going to be sympathy for this group of minors. You ran a story without fact-checking it properly. You could be liable for malice. Therefore, it might be good to settle. Then they enter negotiations for a few days. They hammer out a final total that'll be far lower than the $250 million. CNN pays it out. In return, the lawsuit's dropped, and probably nobody talks about it again. That's the whole goal. Here's the thing. Even a maliciously large ask like that is justified in a case where you've got slander of this kind. The Covington kids have now been doxxed. They've been harassed. They've been subjected to threats against them and against their school, their families. They've had their names, their reputations tarnished. There are still people out there that think that they were the aggressors in the so-called confrontation, which was really kind of a non-issue till the media ran with it tabloid style. They've been permanently harmed in their ability to seek employment and in their ability to date and in their ability to do other things. And they're not even 18. These are high school kids. Some of these kids were 16 years old. So it's a fairly clear-cut case. CNN should immediately offer a settlement, knowing they'll lowball it, and then there'll be the negotiation. They'll probably end up settling for 15, 20, 30 million bucks or something, which is an appropriate amount, I think, for the damage that they've caused. So these kids, after the legal fees, court fees, and stuff, they'll be netting each one of these independent suits against these different entities by the Covington kids, where they get settled or are successful, is getting each of these kids five-figure sums. That's going to go right into a trust fund. These kids don't have to worry about their college costs. These kids don't have to worry for a few. Yes, you can go on a honeymoon to Cancun or something like that. You're not going to have a fucking problem. If you use the money wisely, invest it, pay off debt and stuff, these kids are basically set. They've got a real good jump start just because they had to go through the shit that they went through. And it's justified for them to get paid by these groups for slandering them. It's about time somebody held CNN and other groups responsible for their total fakeness. It's about time somebody held them responsible for their fucking slander. But here's the thing, for those that don't realize what happened, and this is why they'll probably get a settlement, why they'll probably win, essentially, by virtue of that. What happened is that the Covington kids were there in D.C. for like a field trip. Indigenous Peoples Day overlaps with it. A bunch of Native Americans were marching and chanting and stuff. The black Israelis showed up, and this is really what caused what confrontation existed there. If you don't know anything about them, Google them. The black Israelis are a small group of black nationalists that think that they're the real Jews, number one, and they're literally deeply anti-Semitic. They use racial slurs constantly in their street side diatribe, and they can be very funny. It's highly amusing, like literally a meme. The Das Right meme, I believe, comes from the black Israelis. Them talking specifically, I can't remember what they were talking about at the time, but they're racist, literally speaking, in the most literal sense. They're racist. They antagonize the indigenous people. They antagonize the Covington kids. They were antagonizing everyone. In order to drown that out, the Covington kids began doing their school chants. The indigenous people came over and started drumming and stuff, and the Covington kids at first were just sort of dancing around to it. They thought that it was a moment of solidarity against the black Israelis. This was the explanation given. They thought, well, they're coming over, we're all drowning out the hate. They're being noble about it. Then they realized the indigenous people were not over there to cheer them on, and Sandman is literally just standing there kind of awkwardly while the dude's drumming in his face. The other kids are dancing around, then they stop and they're all confused. They're like, they don't know what's going on. Supposedly this was confrontational. The only time in this entire course of span that anyone from Covington or the indigenous people, anyone who wasn't a black Israeli, said anything that could be considered even dubiously racially tinged or bigoted was one of the indigenous people saying, no, this isn't your land, go back to Europe. That's the only time during the entire course of the so-called confrontation that happened. And it wasn't a confrontation. No punches were thrown. Nobody shoved anyone around. The closest you came to being confrontational was that dude Nathan, the indigenous person with the drum, getting up in Sandman's face. And that's not a criminal offense. It's not a criminal offense to get up close to somebody and be drumming in their face. Sandman didn't tell him, by the way, in defense of this dude, Sandman didn't tell him, please back up. I feel uncomfortable. He didn't attempt to back up and then was pursued. He just sort of stood there and smiling and nodding his head slightly. This was taken as racist. Oh my God, he's smirking. Look at this dismissive, evil white male. He's being dismissive of the indigenous people. He probably wants to kill more Native Americans. He probably makes jokes about smallpox blankets. If you had a kid who acted similarly in the same situation, it would be like a prized moment. Be like, oh shit, my kid has balls of steel, incredible self-control. Here's these other people trying to antagonize him. He doesn't even fucking move. He's like Stonewall Jackson or something. Pardon maybe the reference there in regards to Indigenous Peoples Day. He did nothing wrong. The Covington kids were trying to drown out the black Israelis, not drown out the indigenous people. They weren't mocking Native Americans. But that's how it looked if you just looked at the very, very selectively edited initial clip that was run with the whole media. And so they defamed these kids. And some of them retracted. They realized, well, okay, this may not be what's actually happening. Sorry about that. We're going to dig deeper. Some of them did what was right. They retracted, apologized, or they retracted and they said, okay, look, it's up in the air. We're not exactly sure what's going on. By the next day, they shouldn't have been using that excuse, but it is a legal cop-out, I suppose. Some of them didn't. CNN, I believe, did not retract for days. Number one. They left the initial story up. It was still viral. That's a big no-no. Once you realize that story is at least very, very questionable, journalistic integrity would say, look, we at least need to edit the article and add a little bit of an excuse at the end of it saying, look, the situation's changed. We might have gotten it wrong on our hot take. I think it was Washington Post and BuzzFeed were the others, Wall Street Journal and some of these others. I think Heavy.com is listed in their potential lawsuits. Among others, there are a bunch of individual pundits as well. They should sue as many of them they think will settle, and then take their money. Yeah, they should put some of these people, like it'd be funny if they put some of them out of business entirely. It's too much to ask for CNN to have to pay the whole $250 million and lay off a bunch of staff, like Gawker Motors. It's too much to ask because their parent firm will just keep them afloat. So they're not going to go like bankrupt, unfortunately, from it, but it'd be nice. It's nice to see them finally get a little bit of comeuppance for their various high crimes and misdemeanors, because the legacy media, they hide behind free press. They don't operate like a press. They don't distribute information. They just distribute propaganda at this point anyway for various government and non-state agencies. They prop up corporations and globalist banks. They try to censor out of existence their independent competitors. That's what the New York Times did with InfoWars. It's what CNN and these groups. The Wall Street Journal tried to do it to PewDiePie. Hell, BuzzFeed tried to do that, mentioning InfoWars as well, to myself and BP Earthwatch. Guess what? There's only one of those people still on YouTube in their initial form. BP made a new channel. The strikes against him were totally illegitimate, by the way. They were unrelated to the legacy media. Apparently he had some sort of fracas with someone who was, like, personally aggrieved in some way. Like, they had a arguments or something like that. I don't know the full story, so I'm not going to weigh in too much, but that's why by the way, you can look up BP Earthwatch. He's still there under BP Earth or Earthwatch or something like that now. Still got quite a popular channel. I think he's got over 20,000 subs already in the few months that he's been back on. But I wish the Covington kids well. Yeah, you should sue the shit out of these people. And if you think that there's a good possibility winning, don't even take their settlement. Just drag them through court forever. You use the settlements you get from the other cases to pay for a longer term thing and just totally crucify them. Try to get them out of existence. If you can get any of them to go under, like go bankrupt, that'd definitely be newsworthy. Yeah, you get 1 million YouTube videos for that one. Oh, you mean Salon doesn't exist because they owe $100 million more than they actually have in assets? How sad. What a fucking terrible day. That's about all. Peace out.